We're back. What's going on, everybody? It's Christian here at the Mississippi State Live Voice of College Football with my awesome co host, Andrew Miller. We've been doing this together for quite a while now, and we're getting close to the season. Good to see Reese already in the comments. Tonight, we're going to be previewing the Bulldogs' home SEC games. And in a way, I guess we'll kind of break down not necessarily break down, but we will mention some of the games they have in between those. So we're basically giving you the schedule, but emphasis on the in conference home games. Andrew, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Good to be back on and good to have you back here on the show. Yeah, we've been doing schedule preview episodes over the last couple of weeks. We talked about State's non-con opponents 2 weeks ago. Last week talked about their away SEC games. Just getting a look at all of those teams and then how Mississippi State potentially matches up with them, at least what we expect going into the season. And yeah, now we have the home SEC games. We wanted to finish up. Typically, we've been doing these in the back half of the week, but if we did this in the back half of the week, we wouldn't have a time to go and do our big season preview episode. So kind of as a little bit of a teaser later in the week, official day to be decided, but it looks like it's going to be Thursday, most likely Thursday.
Right.
We're not set on a time yet. So because we got some scheduling things on Thursday to get figured out, but we're going to do our big season preview episode breaking down the Bulldogs for 2025, just our final thoughts and our final predictions for the year and how we think they're going to stack up within the SEC. But in order to do that, we have to know how they're going to stack up against the opponents that they're facing, which is why I've been going through doing these scheduled previews, and glad to have Christian on to help with that a little bit here for the last one as we talk about State's SEC home games, some really big matchups for them when you've got three college football playoff teams within the SEC, obviously four if you include Arizona State, but three SEC playoff teams coming to Starkville as well as an Ole Miss team that was right on the outside looking in last season. So those are four preseason top 25 type teams, teams that all have varying expectations. I mean, frankly, expectations of being potential playoff contenders again going into this season. So going to be a challenge. Definitely it's like high profile games. And on the one hand, you want to come and attend because it could be some fun atmospheres. But on the other hand, it's like, man, those are going to be some really difficult games for the Bulldogs here early throughout the 2025 season. But these some really big games for State and games where it's a chance to make a statement for Jeff Lebby in year two, where you're trying to prove that things are moving in the right direction. I do want to say before we get started here, please make sure you like, share, subscribe to the channel, turn that notification bell on so that you know when we do go live. We love to have you guys in here interacting. Shout out to Reese for being on time today. My good buddy right there. Glad to have him here in the show. And yeah, we'd love to be able to interact with you all throughout. A little bit of a teaser. We would like to eventually get to being able to do a call-in show. We think would be a lot of fun here on the channel. That's something we have here at the Voice of College Football Network. We have the opportunity to do that and to interact a little bit more with fans. So yeah, make sure that you get those live notifications on so you know when we go live to get the opportunity to come and interact with us. We love to have it. But yeah, Christian, I mean, just before we get right into teams, I mean, definitely these are some pretty big time opponents for State on the schedule when you talk about their home SEC games.
Yeah, we got, I would say they probably got it tougher at home with who they're playing than maybe, what they go to on the road. I mean, it's harder on the road anyway, as it is, just going to the intimidating crowds that are in the SEC. But, you have games, and we'll break them down tonight. But just to go ahead and let you guys know who we got at home this year for State, you talk about Tennessee, a playoff team last year, Texas, playoff team last year, UGA, playoff team last year, Ole Miss, almost a playoff team. And then, well, that's it. I mean, those are your four go-to SEC home opponents, and then the rest obviously on the road, which we'll get into some other day. But what before we actually dive in, like, I mean, did they get a good draw, or do you think they got a rough patch here? I mean, I know it's Mississippi State, and we could talk about it each week about how, any game's really going to be tough in the SEC. But it seems like some of those tougher ones with Georgia, Texas, and of course Ole Miss, just to get them at home should get you amped up and give you some hope that maybe you come away with at least one upset.
It's a bit of a double-edged sword because on the one hand, you do want to, like you talk about, having those opportunities for big upset wins at home. And you know
Mhm.
the crowds are going to be, assuming the team does take a step forward and you give fans a reason to want to be in the stands at all, you're going to have good crowds on hand for all of those games. People are going to get amped up. People are going to get excited. I know the Tennessee game, it's going to be a whiteout in Starkville. Texas, there's
Nice.
going to be a lot of people who to see that team in the SEC, because obviously State played Texas a year ago, but it was in Austin. So there will be a lot of people who want to come see that game. I think there's a lot of people who want to see the quarterback for the Longhorns as well, to say they got to watch him.
Yeah.
Georgia's always going to be a big draw for State, although it wasn't that long ago that the other Bulldogs came to State. That was in 2022, so it's only been a few years. And then look, the Egg Bowl on Black Friday. It's the Egg Bowl, right? There's going to be plenty of excitement around that. But so as big as that is, when you talk about the draw for State, in a lot of ways, it would be much more beneficial in terms of maximizing the win total if you had those games on the road. And the
Right.
reason I say that is when you talk about teams like Arkansas, like Florida, like Missouri, and Texas A&M. Although I am very high on Texas A&M. If you watch the last episode, I talked about, I think the Aggies going to be really good. And I'm pretty high on Florida as well, but Florida has a lot of questions because of some of the injury concerns. Those are all teams that you look at and say State's chances of getting a win. Like you look at those teams and say State does have a good chance here, or a reasonable chance if they are improved. If that's the case, you kind of want those toss-up games in Starkville. Whereas you look at teams like Texas and Georgia, and not to bury the lead on the episode we're about to put together, but frankly, State's chances of winning those games are incredibly slim. Whether it doesn't matter if Davis Wade Stadium held 100,000 people and was packed out, loudest stadium in the country, State's probably not beating Georgia or Texas, right? Because those teams are just
Probably
significant.
not. Yeah.
Those teams are just significantly better. So in a sense, you're like, why lose a home game where you could get the potential home field advantage edge to push you to a win against a team where that edge is not going to be enough? Now, that being said, as we'll talk about here, Tennessee is a team I definitely have questions about. There might
Mhm.
be some value in not having to go to Rocky Top this year. The Egg Bowl in Starkville, Ole Miss has won the last two in Starkville, so I don't know if that home field advantage will be that big. But to be fair, Ole Miss is a team that also has quite a few questions going into this season with all their replacing. So maybe there is a point to be had that getting those games at home could help you out a little bit more. Uh, it is definitely a tough draw overall, though. We knew it was going to be this way because the schedule just flipped from a season ago, right? I mean, it's the exact
Right.
same SEC opponents that you played last year. Last year, you were playing all these teams on the road. And I actually talked about this from the other perspective a season ago for Jeff Lebby, that I thought if there was a chance for Lebby to get to a bowl in year one, at the time, we did not realize they were going to be nearly as terrible as they were. We thought, bowl eligibility was a possibility. I pointed out that, hey, man, getting Florida and Arkansas, who going into last year were expected to be two of the worst teams in the SEC alongside Mississippi State, but expected to be two of the worst teams in the SEC, getting them at home is big because you get that opportunity at
Absolutely.
getting those wins. And, obviously State loses both those games, two of the worst defensive games they played all season. It didn't end up mattering because State was so bad. But last year's slate was a little bit more favorable in terms of State being able to maximize their win total. And if they had, I think if you had this year's team with last year's schedule, I would feel really good about State's chances of getting to a bowl game. This year's team with this schedule, it's like that win total improvement could be tough to pull off because of where these games fall. Um,
Yeah.
but it's a challenge for sure. But like as you said, every schedule in the SEC, even the ones we laugh at and say that's a really easy schedule, they're always going to be difficult. And even going on the road for some of the games you're talking about, they're going to be really difficult whether you play them home or away.
Yeah, I mean, it's you know, I've been watching the new like SEC documentary on Netflix, and if you haven't seen it yet, it's amazing. Any given Saturday, and They were talking in the first episode, and we've seen a little bit of Jeff Levy so far. I'm not going to spoil it too much or anything, but one of the
There's
first
not a lot of
episodes, it was
spoiler, to be fair. I only
yeah,
watched
yeah,
the Mississippi State one. Not much happens. And there is the fact of like, we all know how the season played out.
yeah,
Not to cut you off here, but I wanted to talk a
yeah,
little bit MSU. I know like with LSU, there was some in South Carolina, I think there were some behind the scenes things that people learned. With Mississippi State, it was kind of just like, yeah, man, here's Stone Blandon with his Ole Miss family, and
yeah.
here's Jeff Levy's son launching a football through the house. Like that was kind of the extent of the behind the scenes we got for
Yeah.
MSU.
Yeah, it was cool to see. Great series. I think I got like one or two left. But anyway, I bring this up because what they were talking about, regardless of the teams, I mean, you see a little bit of Florida, you see some of LSU, a lot of LSU early on, but everyone emphasized how tough it is in this conference and how you not only have to, but there's something in the SEC that just fuels your blood to want to give it your all every single week. And Mississippi State's one of those teams in this league that has to do that. And I can tell that they want to do that. They've done that before. They've done it with coaches and players in years past. Now it's time to turn the page with Jeff Levy. And, you get some of these tougher games at home. I'm not asking you to go out and actually pull off an upset and win these. It would be nice, but you got to be able to compete and show them why Starkville's, SEC country. You got to show that. So that's why I brought that up there.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it is a cool series getting to see a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, even if Mississippi State we didn't get much. But you are right. This is an opportunity for Jeff Levy to make a statement to his
Hmm.
fan base with some of the home games that you get this year. We've talked about it, and it's not just the SEC, like that Arizona State game in week 2. That is,
Yeah.
I've circled it as the most important game of the season, just because of what it could mean for the program if you pull off a win there, and even just a competitive game for setting the tone for the season, like and showing that you are clearly improved and moving in the right direction. That would be very beneficial. Like with that game, the Tennessee game, as we're going to talk about here just in a second, that I think is an opportunity to maybe spring an upset. Just some of the questions I have about the Vols. I know this game is coming up a lot on Twitter right now, and Tennessee fans are largely getting very upset that anyone would dare suggest they could lose in Starkville. But that's Vol Twitter for you. But that game, and then look, the Egg Bowl at the end of the year, and having those games in Starkville and what they can ultimately mean for the season, those are huge opportunities for Jeff Levy, and ideally he needs to acquit himself well for State to be able to show that they've taken a step forward and give this fan base something to be really excited about for the future. I mean, so let's get into talking about these opponents, and we'll start off with
Yeah.
the Tennessee team. A lot of drama this offseason in Knoxville, just with everything that's been going on. Obviously, the Nico Iamaleava situation. You lost a lot of key players, specifically on the offensive side of the ball, but even a few guys on defense as well. Some talented guys back, but you got some injury concerns at some positions. There was the Boo Carter thing that went on. This is a Tennessee team where it kind of feels like it's a little bit of a weird situation. And, it does start with the Nico deal and now Joey Aguilar, who's officially been named the starting quarterback. I think when it comes to Nico and the offense, I think two things can be true. And the one part of that is that he did not play well enough last year. He did not operate the offense the way they needed him to. This is an offense that really does not put a ton on the quarterback, but there's a lot of scheming it up to where, hey, if we get a guy open on a deep shot down the field, you've got to hit those. And he didn't hit them with the consistency that he needed to. So I think Tennessee was fully justified for not wanting to pay his asking price and not wanting to deal with his family, frankly, and just all that came with that. On the flip side, what I also think is true is that the talent level at quarterback did just get worse. And I know there's a lot of hype around Joey Aguilar right now because he's been named the starter. And apparently he's done a great job picking up the system here in fall camp after not going through spring. And, people are going back and looking at some of what he did at App State and getting some buzz. But the reality is Nico is a more talented quarterback. He has a bigger arm. He's more athletic. Does that mean he's going to execute this? He was executing the system better than Aguilar will? No, it doesn't mean that. As we saw, Nico, despite having that talent, had his issues a season ago. But it's also, we can't sit here and say that Aguilar is going to step in and 100% be an upgrade. Like, there is a point to be had. Talent level does set a floor for what you're able to achieve. And there are some throws Nico was probably able to make last year that I don't know if Aguilar is going to be able to make. Definitely from an athleticism standpoint. Aguilar can run a little bit, but he's not going to be the run threat that Nico was. So that changes a lot for the offense. I think Aguilar can step in and be a good player for them. I think he's got a big enough arm that he can hit the throws downfield. He's pretty decisive, which is a good thing for them. And he's also a good enough of a runner that if they want to ask him to keep the ball in his own read, he can do that. But he's not going to be the same number in the run game that Nico was. And I do think that matters when we talk about what else is available on the roster. If he cuts down to the turnovers, last year did throw, I think it was 14 interceptions at App State, which was a bit of a concern. If he cuts down to the turnovers, I think he could be a solid option for them. The problem is I wonder about the supporting cast. And this is the thing Nico's camp was arguing that Tennessee fans rolled their eyes at. But I do think there are fair questions about what Tennessee has on offense outside of quarterback. You lose Dylan Sampson, who last year was 1,500 yards, 15 touchdowns. And what made Sampson so impressive at tailback was that even in a system that's kind of designed to artificially create the run game because of the spacing that they operate with and the way defenses often end up giving them a light box to run into, defenses were able to play Tennessee a little bit differently last year because they didn't respect the downfield passing game the way they have in the past. So there were more times that Tennessee was having to run against a loaded box. They weren't getting the same looks that they always got, which meant Sampson, when they're handing it off to him, he had to do more to make plays. And he did. For a smaller back, he did a good job of being a physical runner between the tackles. He did a good job of picking up yards after contact. He was an absolute stud for them. Now, the argument will be made that every single year, they've had a running back be productive. Jalen Wright was a couple seasons ago. In the past, it hasn't been one guy, but they've sort of had a stable of backs they can work with. And they kind of feel that's probably the case this year.
Yeah.
But are those guys going to be able to do what I just talked about with Sampson, which is make stuff happen when there's not much there available? Because I think they might still have to – I'm kind of leading into my big concern with this offense, as I'll get to at the end. I think they might have to be able to run the football really effectively once again this year, as in not just this offense always runs the ball, right? This is an offense that wants to run the football and will put up big rushing yards. Last year, they had to be run heavy more so than ever before because of the limitations they had in the passing game. I think that might happen again this year for a reason that I'll get to. Do you have a guy that can make that stuff happen? Deshaun Bishop was a solid number 2. They had Star Thomas from Duke, who was Duke's top running back last year, 871 yards, 7 touchdowns. I know they've got another kid in the backfield that they like. They have 3 running backs that they can probably build around and can be productive players. I think they'll be more than good enough at running the football when they have good looks to run into. Can you be physical in the short yardage situations? Can you be effective in the run game when you don't have the same favorable numbers that you've had in the past, especially when you have a quarterback that can run some but isn't the same number in the run game that Nico was? And here's another reason for that. Offensive line. They got 4 starters gone. Now, last year, that group struggled against some of the good defensive fronts that they saw. And the argument is that the talent is better now. They got a 5-star freshman coming in David Sanders. Wendell Moe from Arizona, Sam Pendleton from Notre Dame. Those are a couple transfers who are guys who are starters and have been, really good players at previous stops that are stepping in. They think there's talent, but they don't have nearly as much experience. And offensive line is one of those rooms where experience matters quite a bit. Now, I think they do have some good tight ends. Miles Kitselman, Ethan Davis, those guys are going to help them out and help them be more of a physical run game, which, again, is what they want to be able to do and have to be able to do. But I do wonder, are they going to actually be improved upon the offensive line? Are they going to be just as good? Are they going to avoid being able to take a step back? Like, I've got questions about that. Where this is all leading, because of, like, I think they're going to have to lean on the run heavily again. It comes back to wide receiver. I think that's a huge question mark for this team. The top three are gone from a year ago. The guy who returned, Chris Brazzell, was merely okay, and he really did his damage against bad defenses. And he's also dealing with an injury in camp. They got a couple young guys in Braylon Staley and Mike Matthews that they're very high on and they think could step in. Those guys are unproven. And Staley is injured as well. So 2 of the top 3 receivers expect to go into this year are dealing with injuries in camp. None of those guys have shown they are surefire, can't hit guys. And again, this is a system where you need receivers who can win consistently one-on-one down the field. Like, you have to have that in this offense. Do they have that guy? I don't know. So what I come back to with all these points about, why you'd want to move away from Nico and bring in Joey Aguilar and like what Tennessee is justified, at the same time, I don't know if Aguilar has the supporting cast around him that he's going to need to be successful offensively the way he wants. Like, I don't know that the O-line in front of him is going to be a great group. I don't know that the receiving core is consistently going to be winning one-on-one down the field. I think they've got good talent at running back, but are those guys able to be the same players Dylan Sampson was? I got questions about this Vol offense. I think Josh Heupel is a good offensive mind, although I do think he probably needs to evolve a little bit more than he has with what he's doing. But there's fair questions about what Tennessee's going to be able to do offensively this year.
I fully agree. Like, I have no doubt in my mind that Josh Heupel has shown he can run an offense and he can put the guys on the field that are very talented. And I think we've seen good recruits come into Tennessee. I think that it's not a plug and play program where one guy goes out and you can easily trust the next man. It's not Alabama. It's not Georgia. It's not, which I'll talk about Texas in a little bit, but I don't see it. Credit to them for making the playoffs last year, but you got beat by Ohio State pretty badly. And it's just one of those things where the defense has some flaws right now. It could be improved, but like I was saying, and this even goes for Joey Aguilar. I mean, do I think he can be a great quarterback? Sure. He's not going to give you what Nico gave you last year, talent wise. But it's, like I said, it's not a plug and play type of school where, yes, you can recruit a lot of talent, but it's still not enough. Like, if they don't have a 4-star available, they're probably going to another 4-star or a 3-star. You don't see much in the 5-star elite blue chip category for Tennessee. And on Mississippi State side of things, I think the fact that Tennessee has all these question marks and you get them at home, I think there's a lot of optimism to go win a game like this.
And look, I don't think the offense is going to be bad for Tennessee because I do think
Right.
there's a floor to running the system that they're running. They will be able to be productive to a certain extent. I mean, look, if you told me Aguilar ends up having better numbers than Nico did a year ago, I can see that because Nico had some really rough moments. I even with the lesser talent, I can see it, but I need to see receivers step up. I need to see offensive line step up. And like we talk about, being a plug and play system, it can be at quarterback, but it has to be like with everybody else fitting in. Comment from Reese here. Nobody wants to talk about how Heupel's Tennessee's offense has slowly declined every year since the Stars line to 2022 and will decline again this year from last year. I think it's possible.
Yeah.
And I do think some of it, and Tennessee fans don't want to hear this, there is some level of this system getting figured out. And I say this, Mississippi State runs a version of this system. So let me be clear. I'm not just taking a shot at the Vols here. Now, I think the difference with Jeff Lebby is I think Lebby has evolved the offense more. I think Lebby has done more with taking the system and moving it in a different direction to keep it ahead of the curve. Whereas I think Heupel has largely tried to keep running the same thing that they've had for the past few years. And I think it's kind of reached a point with some of the things with the way defenses are starting to play this system, it puts more of a pressure on, like, you've got to have dudes at receiver. You've got to be strong up front along the offensive line. Some of the areas where I think in the past you probably could have gotten away with, I think when this system was first bursting on the scene at Baylor, like they recruited super fast dudes at receiver. Everything else, it was kind of just solid developmental guys that they coached up, but they were able to get away with it because no one understood how to deal with this system. Well,
Right.
we've been seeing this now for 15 years in the sport. So, and now like it was new in the SEC a few years ago, but now it's been in the SEC for a few years. And I think in order for it to be fully effective the way they want it to be, I think there's a certain level of talent that they have to have at key positions on offense that I don't know that they have. So that's a big concern for them. Now, and look, that is a reason if you're a Mississippi State fan to think you've got a chance. The flip side here, I do think Tennessee is going to be pretty good defensively once again.
Right.
Last year, this was a really good defense. And I think, they should still be really good overall. They do lose their top two pass rushers, James Pierce off the edge, who was their best rusher. And then Omar Norman Lott at defensive tackle was second on the team in sacks. They have a starter gone at defensive tackle in Amari Thomas. So, they've lost a good bit. But this is a team that along the defensive line rotated bodies heavily a season ago. They have a lot of guys back who played well for them a season ago. Joshua Joseph's at edge. They need him to convert quarterback hurries into sacks more. I think it was like 8 QB hurries, but only 1.5 sacks for him a season ago. So they need him to finish the deal. But he is a good defensive end who's got a high ceiling. Defensive end Dominic Bailey opposite of him is another good player back. Bryson Easton, the defensive tackle. They've got a strong group at defensive line still. They don't have the same depth as they did a year ago. And they do need to find someone to be that main pass rush. Last year, Pierce was the one guy who really they could always trust, going to get after quarterbacks. Do you have that guy on this defense again? Talent-wise, I think the possibility is certainly there, but they need somebody to come and emerge to be that player. And it is a question. You lose a James Pierce. How does that impact the rest of the defensive line when offenses have to focus on that one guy so much? That frees up everybody else on that defensive line. So what does that group look like without him? I still think they're going to be good along the defensive line. Linebackers in really great shape. Arian Carter was the leading tackler a year ago. Jeremiah Talander's another really good player there. DB, they lose a really good safety in Will Brooks, but everybody else could be back. Now, the key there is that, like, Jermon McCoy at corner, if healthy, he is one of the top cornerbacks in the country. Well, he tore his ACL back in spring. Now he's working his way back. They feel like his progress is good. They feel like they're going to have him available for this year. Will they, though? That's always kind of a big question. And, if he does have to miss time, how much time does he miss? If he does miss a few weeks, even if he's back by the Mississippi State game, is he fully up to speed? That's going to be a question for them. There's the Boo Carter situation with Boo Carter at nickel, and that's a whole thing that feels like it's probably been resolved. I'm not trying to make a mountain out of a molehill here. It feels like he's back with the team. I know he's back. He's back with the team practicing. He's part of scrimmage. It looks like he's set to be another one of their top players once again. But that is kind of a weird situation. Overall, I think this Tennessee defense is still going to be really good. And that will be something that you have to deal with when it comes to Mississippi State. But I think this is a team that can lean on their defense again. And Christian, I know you saw it firsthand as an Alabama guy. We saw what Tennessee's defense could be a season ago. Do you think, they could still, even if they take a slight step back, can this be a defense that's good enough to carry them to some wins? Potentially this one in Starkville.
If it takes a step back,
I will say, I don't think they're going to take a huge step back. So I'll say a slight step back.
If it's a huge drop off,
that's a different story.
A whole other story. Right. But if it's taking a small step back, yes, I still think it's good enough to compete and possibly get you some really good wins on the schedule, like Mississippi State, maybe on the road somewhere. I don't know, but it's Tennessee, is I don't think they're like the Big 12 teams that we used to always talk about. years ago when Texas and Oklahoma were still in there, where we said it's all offense and no defense at all. I don't think that's Tennessee. I think it's okay defense, good enough, and elite pass catchers, quarterback play calling on offense. That's Tennessee. And I feel like some of that on the defensive side, with it being good enough, I think you'll see that in games like Mississippi State. And we just talked about their offense and everything too, but that's taken a step back, but we just got to see what Joey does on the field.
Yeah, I think the identity is definitely a few seasons ago. It was like be good enough defense. I think it kind of flipped the last couple
Yeah.
years to being more of a defense first type team. I think they're going to have to be defense first again. I've already explained my questions with this team offensively. I think they'll be defensive first again. I think it's going to be a really good defense again. I do wonder, will they be as strong as a year ago? And look, Mississippi State didn't have a great game up in Knoxville. Frankly, Michael Van Buren, that was the worst game he played all season. Well, the Egg Bowl was pretty rough, but the Tennessee game was probably the worst game he played all season. You still were able to run the ball decently well in that game. Could you maybe be able to replicate, do more in Starkville this year? We'll see. Mm-hmm. Which, getting into that, okay, biggest strength for this Tennessee team will just be the defense. I don't know if it's going to be as good as last year, but it should still be really good. Biggest weakness, it's wide receiver. If this team had a couple proven guys at receiver, I would fully buy in that, okay, they can take another step forward offensively. They can be better off. And then I would be more in line with this team being able to once again be a playoff contender this year, the schedule allows them to be a playoff contender. They're on the lighter end where they've got a lot of games that they should just be a favorite. We want to talk about the defense being able to just win them games. They have games with the schedule that will allow it to happen.
I got them around like 8-4 because
I'm more
like
in line with
they got the games like a Mississippi State. They're going to have teams like Georgia and Alabama. I think Georgia might even be at home this year for them, but there's just going to be those teams. And I feel like, and I'm not saying it's going to be State, they're going to find a way to lose a game they shouldn't. It might be Florida or something, but there's going to be some SEC teams that trip them up. And also look out for Vanderbilt, man. Diego Pavia late in the season. How good are they going to be? So you got to take some of that into account with this schedule. And then, don't forget, out of conference, they do open with Syracuse. I'm actually pretty high on them. And that is a neutral site in Atlanta, I believe.
Maybe. Syracuse is losing a lot. I feel like that's probably a pretty big regression candidate from where they were a season ago. But yeah, man, it's an interesting team. In terms of the matchup for MSU, what I'll say is, like, if State's defense has taken a significant step forward, like, this is their opportunity to show it. Like, This is a Tennessee offense, unless I am just completely off base, and they're stronger up front of the offensive line. Aguilar truly is better off for them. They've got dudes at receiver. If that's the case, then okay, this team is going to end up being really good. I have big questions about this Tennessee offense. If State's defense has taken a true significant step forward, this is the opportunity to show you have improved significantly when we talk about the State defense. This is a Tennessee offense that I think you can have some success stopping, especially home field advantage in Starkville, whiteout game. Like, this is an opportunity. Now, the other side of the ball, I mean, State's it's going to be a challenge. I still think that Tennessee defense is really good. But what I will look at and say, last year, a State offense with what I think is a worse offensive line and what I think was going to be worse quarterback play than they're going to get, was able to go and at least put together a couple touchdown drives up in Knoxville. Could you convince me of them being able to get another 10 points on the board in this game and win like 24 to – can you hold Tennessee under 24 points? I know people are going to laugh at that idea when we talk about the State defense, but look at what Tennessee's offense did in SEC play a season ago.
Yeah.
Like, it was rough in SEC play for them last year. And I know, like, they put up 33 on Mississippi State. They also went 0 for 6 in the red zone on scoring touchdowns against Mississippi State. And again, I know Tennessee fans will say, well, that was Nico. I'm not convinced that getting rid of Nico fixed their problems.
I think it regressed because you mentioned they put up what'd you say, 33, 34 points last year
It
on
was
Tennessee
33 last year
or
in
on State?
yes. Now, but they did not convert in the they went 0 for 6 on getting red zone touchdowns.
Yeah. They were well that was just their kind of their season. They weren't really much of a red zone scoring. They were either going to take the deep shots on and fool you with it or nothing. And I'm not saying anything to diss on them, but dude, we've talked a lot on this show about State's defense. Now we're talking a little bit of Tennessee tonight with how, we both kind of agree there's going to be some regression, not a whole lot, hopefully, but there's going to be some for Joey Aguilar coming in, losing a receiver or two. And State should, I don't want to say easily, but they should be able to hold this team to 24 points, 28
Realistically,
maybe, if they win. If they lose, this team's probably going to score in the 30s. We'll see.
I will say realistically for State, like you are probably talking about having to hold Tennessee under 28 to have a
Yeah.
chance. And to be fair, like is State going to be able to score 28 plus points against Tennessee's defense? I don't know. Which is why I do think it might have to be State's defense steps up big time. Like prove you can hold up against what I believe is going to be a mediocre, if not below average, SEC offense. I'm not buying into the hype that this Tennessee offense is going to take a big step forward. This is going to be the big test for State's defense. A game that will also be a massive test. The preseason number 1 teams, the Texas Longhorns, will come to Starkville.
Yes.
That game comes in October at the end of the month after a road trip to Florida. That'll actually be back-to-back road trips for State, although but with Texas A&M and Florida, although they will have a bye week in between those. Then come back home to Starkville to take on Texas. Christian, Arch Manning era begins. Could not be more hype. What do you see from the Longhorn offense going into the year? And obviously, we know what it starts with.
It does start with Arch, and honestly, this is my team to possibly win the SEC this year. I get them being ranked that high. I think Sark's been building a good program, especially on offense. I feel like the past couple years coming into the SEC and the recruiting and everything, they kind of figure it out defensively too. I think it's going to be an improved defense for Texas. This is also, unless I got it wrong, but you can correct me, this should be our homecoming game in Starkville. What I read.
Yeah, it is homecoming, and people got really ticked off about that. Like, why on earth would you do homecoming in a game you're probably going to get blown out in? The answer is just where it falls on the schedule. I think people made sort of a big fuss about it. The reality is it's just
homecoming is October anyway for like everybody in college football. It's not even an SEC thing.
It's because they didn't want to do home. Okay, State schedule talk. You don't want to do homecoming in September. Well, 4 of State's home games on the year, when they only have 7 for the season, are in September. Well, then your other 2 home games, you have the Egg Bowl. You're not doing homecoming for the final game of the year. I guess so. Your other options are are we going to do Texas or Georgia for homecoming? That. Right. Those are your choices, realistic. Unless you.
And that's honestly for this season. I don't think one's tougher than the other. I think Texas and Georgia. It's a coin flip. But I look at Texas.
Could they have done a September? Could they have done a September homecoming? Sure. Teams sometimes do it if the schedule's like what Mississippi State has. But at the same time, it's September in the South. Nobody wants to be doing homecoming when it's going to be 1,000,000 degrees outside.
Of course.
They had to pick later in the year, so the options were only going to be Texas or Georgia.
Yeah.
They went with Texas. And I kind of alluded to this earlier in the episode, and to a certain extent it makes sense considering there will be a lot of people who want to come and see Texas playing in Starkville for the first time since 1991. A game Mississippi State won, by the way, under Jackie Sherrill. was that Starkville? I think it was in Starkville,
I
91 or
don't know.
90. Well, I know you know. They played a home and home with Texas in 91 and 92. And State won both
Okay.
of those games with Jackie Sherrill, the former Texas A&M coach, beating Texas. With one of those games, he famously castrated a bull before the game to show that they were going to be making what they were ready to do to Texas, and they won. So, but yeah, this
Okay.
is you have the Longhorns coming to Starkville for the first time in like
In
30 plus
decades.
years. People are
Yeah.
going to want to come to that. So, like, I understand why you chose it as homecoming, even if the final result will probably be ugly. But yeah, let's talk about this Texas offense.
Yeah, no, I think it takes a step back, but I still think it's one of the best in college football. I say it takes a step back. Think about it, man. You lose Isaiah Bond to the draft. You lose Quinn Ewers, who the Dolphins picked up, and he's backing up Tua now, which he'll probably get a lot of playing time, I guess. Um, but some guys come in, some guys come back, however you want to put it. I don't know about their go-to starting guys. They lost Golden, Bond, and Helm. Next man up based on last year, I look at guys like Ryan Wingo, had 2 touchdowns last year, over 400 yards. Basically, they should have no problem. They're going to have young and inexperienced type of guys that didn't have a whole lot to say last year,
Wingo
but
is a guy they're
I
very high on. I know that.
they
Like,
are, yes, yes,
so
and I I just I feel like I don't know, man. I love Texas's offense this year. Now, can Mississippi State, we talk about them and we talk about their defense. If you put them up, which you did, um, like last year, they couldn't handle what they had offensively. Quinn Ewers to Isaiah Bond was happening all year long. Xavier Worthy was happening all year long. If Mississippi State takes those steps forward defensively and you have games like this at home, not saying you're going to win it, but can you try? Like, again, these are the games you want to hold them to 30 or something and play it close and just kind of get involved. And, you know, I would not be surprised if that happened. I think I would be shocked if we pulled off an upset, but I think we're talking hold them to 30, 35 points. And honestly, for a guy in Sarkeesian that's an offensive genius, that's pretty good for Mississippi State coming off the season they just had.
yeah, I mean, look, this one's going to be tough. I think this Texas
Yeah,
offense will probably be really good. There is a one position group that I do have a big question about, but I mean, look, we didn't really even get into Arch. It's time to see if he can back up the hype. Look, he adds more mobility than
yeah,
Ewers. He is a guy that can be a legit dual threat, adds more arm talent. And the thought process is also from a mental standpoint, he can do more from a passing game standpoint to where it's not just with Quinn, they kind of just sort of had to scheme it up for him. Like, hey, either you're throwing to this guy, you're taking a check down. And that was kind of like the offense with him. They think with Arch, he can handle a little bit more on his plate and like do more full field reads, work
yeah,
progressions a little bit more. Big boy quarterbacking is sort of what you expect that with a guy who is a Manning, right? He's been trained for this literally his entire life. So, you know, they're going to need him to do that. And look, I think they're going to need it because some of the pieces around him. Now, that said, I also think they're going to have the receivers to do it. I know they lose their top 3 pass catchers from a year ago. But like I said, Ryan Wingo's a guy they like a lot. DeAndre Moore was a starter a season ago. He's back. Jack Indries, who's a tight end transfer from Cal, is a good pass catcher. I think they're going to be able to spread the field and probably sling it around a little bit more than they did this previous year. Whereas with Ewers, it was a lot more of having to run the ball and set up shots down the field. Sark is
yeah,
always going to want to do that. I think with Manning, they're going to be able to spread them out a little bit more. And it's not going to be air raid, but I think old school Peyton Manning type Colts, where we're spreading the field and it's a lot of, you know, Manning working his way down the field. I think his nephew is kind of going to be operating that same sort of an offense here in Austin.
it wouldn't surprise me either if it was a little bit of air raid. Like that wouldn't come as a shock to me. But yeah, with Quinn, it was kind of like if it wasn't there, he's going to take off and run. And I know Arch is going to do that too. But I thought at times Quinn just wanted to run the football, and it still worked. Arch is going to want to throw that ball and work with his teammates. And I comparison moment here. Do you remember 2018 Alabama with Tua, Henry Ruggs, Jerry Judy, and how explosive they were that they could just 50-yard bomb it every time? I'm not saying it's going to be that necessarily, but I just have a gut feeling it could be close to that. It might not be 50-yard bombs on the first play of the game, but you're gonna take some shots downfield, and it's going to pay off 9 times out of 10 for Texas.
Well, yeah, and like obviously, like that wasn't a Sark offense. We had Sark. Sark was the. I said we. I'm not a Bama guy.
2018, we had oh crap, I don't even know who we had.
Well, I mean, I know
It
like
wasn't Sark. It wasn't
Loxley
Sark.
and Dayball were the OCs, I think.
It was Mike Loxley. I remember that. And Dayball had left to go back to the Patriots, I thought, after that 2017 year. But anyways,
regardless, I know Sark. We saw the offense a couple years later with what he did with that group of receivers.
yeah.
I think this might be a little bit more though. If you remember Alabama, if we're going to make Alabama comparisons here,
Mm-hmm.
I know Bama fans hate this name, but Bill O'Brien with the offense he ran with Bryce Young, the first
Yeah.
year at least. That's kind of more of what I'm thinking. That was a lot of pro style passing. That was a lot more of
Yeah.
spreading the field and slinging it around, as opposed to just setting up play action shots down the field and just a ton of RPO game. And look, to be fair, Sark is going to do those things. Like Sark is very much a scheme it up type offense. But I think he might be able to. He had to do that with Quinn because Quinn was just not a guy who was going to be able to work through reads. I think with Arch, they're going to put more on his plate. I think they got the pass catchers to do it.
Yeah.
I think they might also have to do that, though, a little bit from offensive line standpoint. They do have questions. They got 4 starters gone from that group, and last year's team didn't live up to expectations for that O-line. They had some pretty high expectations, and they weren't as good as they wanted to be. But you're still losing, the top offensive lineman in the country and Kelvin Banks, who is a New Orleans Saint now, which as a Saints fan, I love to have him. But at the same time, I'm not to turn this into an NFL show, but just seeing the fact that the Saints draft offensive linemen every single year and still have a terrible offensive line, that's just so wonderful. As I looking back on what they did in the preseason just yesterday, that's lovely.
Go Bucks.
But anyway, at least
Oh,
you're not
I'll
a
say.
Falcons fan. I'll take that. At least you're not a
Yeah.
Falcons fan.
Thank God.
Yeah. No, but they're losing a lot up front of the offensive line. The way they could kind of alleviate that a little bit is like with Ewers, they couldn't really get into the quick passing game because it kind of had to be schemed up for them. With Manning,
Yeah.
they probably can spread the field a little bit and say, like, yeah, man, the pass rush is going to be on you, but which I don't think Texas is going to be a bad offensive line. I'm not saying they're going to give a bunch of pressure, but they could have questions up front. With Manning, you can put it on him and say, you have to know what's going to get open and get the ball out. And he feels like a guy who could handle that even as a sophomore here. It won't be his first start. He started against Mississippi State. So if you're Mississippi State, you played him last year. You saw what he has to offer. But I think they could put more on his plate. And look, I mean, they're going to have guys at running back. Quintravian Weiser comes back, who's a 1,000-yard back. They're getting C.J. Baxter back from injury. So that's it. They're going to be really good at running back. The weapons are there at receiver, even with some of the guys they lost. I think Arch can be a true pro-style quarterback for them, which is you don't get a lot of that at the college level, which if you've got that at college, man, it gives you an edge that a lot of teams don't have. Are they going to be able to mash up front the way they probably want to? I don't know. But I don't think they're going to suck on the offensive line. Texas offense is probably going to be really stinking good. And Christian, they're probably going to be good defensively as well.
Yeah, I think there's obviously like more with Texas defensively, it's like there's more questions there than the offense, obviously. But I feel like over the past few years, and I know they've only been in the SEC 1 year, but I feel like they got their defense figured out a little bit. Sark's an offensive mind, kind of like a Lane Kiffin, where you don't see too much defense, but he's trying to work hard at it. And I feel like Sark's catching on a little bit more than Lane Kiffin is right now, if I'm being honest. And that's not a shot at like Ole Miss or anything, but yeah, it should be improved. I don't have uh players on defense too much in front of me, but I think they lost Jade Barron at corner, and they definitely lost Andrew Makuba, who was formerly at Clemson as well. Both of those guys have turned pro. So I think it's a next man up type of mentality there. And surely, no matter who they have on the field, I mean, it's not going to be Georgia level or anything, but you would expect Texas to take some good steps forward, but also like have some inexperience, I guess you would say.
There's a couple spot on the back end. You talk about losing Jade Barron. Like, there's some questions for them at corner. And yeah, losing Bakuba as well. Dude, I mean, their pass rush is going to be nasty. They
Oh
do
yeah.
lose Darren Sorrell, who was, one of their top pass rushers a year ago. But Trey Moore and Colin Simmons, it could be as good a defensive end duo as there's going to be in the country. Last year, those guys combined for 14 and a half sacks, 23 and a half tackle for loss, and 15 quarterback hurries.
Don't forget leader in tackles. He had 8 sacks too, 59 tackles, Anthony Hill. Don't
Yeah,
forget him.
Anthony Hill last year,
I had to look
113
that name
tackles.
up real quick. 130. Yeah. Okay, I see
Yeah,
that.
he had 113 tackles, 16 and a half tackle for loss, and 8 sacks. So, like, you've got 2 insane rushers off the edge. You've got a great blitzer at Anthony Hill. They are going to be able to terrorize quarterbacks. Now, the question is, like, what they're losing at defensive tackle. Their top
Right.
5 are gone, and they brought in several transfers. The guy they're relying the heaviest on looks to be Purdue's Cole Brevard, who's like a
Okay.
350-pound type guy. Like, he's a massive force there in the middle. He was a really productive player at Purdue over the last few seasons. They have some questions there, but look, they had questions at that position going into a season ago. If you remember 2 years ago, Texas had that top defensive tackle duo in the country with Sweat and it was Tavondre Sweat, and then I'm blanking on the other guy's name. And it was like, okay, how are they going to replace him? They didn't get the same production, but they went to the portal, brought in good players, and they were fine. This year, I think the expectation is going to kind of be the same, that the guys they step in are going to be good. And considering the pieces they have rushing off the edge, as long as those guys in the middle can be space eaters, and they're probably starting a couple 350-pounders. So you want to talk about space eaters, they're going to have them there on the middle of that defensive line. They're
Yeah.
probably still going to be fine
There's
up front.
another guy. There's another guy that stands out. Actually, he comes actually a transfer from Ohio State. Which, speaking of big Week 1 games, right? Like, Hero Canoe is a senior out of Germany, but he comes over from Ohio State, and he's not the biggest guy. I mean, size we talk about, with Mississippi State is a big deal, but 6'5", 299. I'd be interested to see him with some experience coming in this year as a transfer. I want to see how they use him a little bit.
They brought in several options, and they're going to need guys to step up because of what they lost. But I think with, again, the guys they have at edge rusher, I think they added some nice additions along the defensive interior. They need those guys to step in and perform well. The ceiling is incredibly high for the Texas's front 6 of that defense. Can be really,
Yeah.
really good. Back end, as you kind of mentioned, there could be some questions because you're losing Jade Barron and Makuba. But look, Malik Muhammad was, a really, really good corner for them. He's back. Michael Taff was a very productive safety. Jalen Gilbo, who was their nickel a season ago, is moving to that other corner spot, which is a move that Jade Barron made the season before. So, like, Barron went from being their nickel to going and playing corner and won the Thorpe Award. So they're kind of hoping Gilbo can sort of do the same thing for them. They need a
Yeah.
couple guys to step in. Can Gilbo make that transition to be the other corner? And even if he can, do they have a guy at nickel who can step in? Because in this day and age, your nickel needs to be able to cover. Like, that's modern football. They can't just be a guy who's a big tackling machine. He also has to be able to cover down the field. Do they have that guy? That is a little bit of a question for them, but they're probably not going to have to cover that long considering how good the pass rush is going to be up front. So
Absolutely.
I think Texas defensively is going to be really good. Once again, when we talk about the strength of this team, it is that pass rush. That is the thing I look at for this team, is like the best thing they have going for them is the guys they have who can get after QBs. That's going to be massive for that team. Weakness, I guess it's the fact that you have questions at offensive line. I think the D tackles they brought in are solid, but you do have questions there, and you have questions at corner. So those are key positions that if you want to talk about projecting who's going to ultimately win the national championship, I'm not even talking about from the standpoint of like being able to make the playoff or be one of the top teams in the SEC. They're going to be, and they're probably going to be a playoff team.
Yeah.
If you want to make a deep run, those other positions I could see come into play a little bit more. And like those being question marks gives me a little bit of pause with Texas. But overall, I do think this is a team that just is going to be good enough to give teams a lot of problems. And I just think matchup-wise for Mississippi State, I don't think State's got much of a chance against Texas. I really don't.
No.
I don't think
I
State
wish. But
believe me, I do. I don't think State's corners are going to be able to hold up against what Texas has at receiver. I definitely don't think State. I think State's offensive line is better this year. I don't think they're going to be able to deal with what Texas is able to bring off the edge.
yeah.
So yeah, I do think that's going to be a challenge dealing with them, and yeah, I think that's going to be a really difficult challenge for Mississippi State to be able to deal with Texas. It's sort of a game you just kind of have to get through here in the middle of the season and hopefully make stuff happen later in the year.
College football is even more exciting when you've got some action on the line, and the games are even better when you're cashing in. And the Voice of College Football is the place to be to get the greatest value. Start with my picks. 75% against the money line, 58% against the spread, and I've got a 40-plus year track record. 11-0 in the college football playoff for me last year against the money line, 8-3 against the spread. And I'm just the warm-up act. Steve Merrill of Wager Talk is our ace in the hole, show stopper. 7 years with the Voice of College Football, over 30 years in the industry. Steve gives us analysis on all the big games, but you can't miss Steve's weekly under-the-radar pick. 28-12 against the spread the last 3 years. You also get picks from some of our top analysts here at the Voice of College Football, including Corey Bratta, Matt Zemek, and Steve Dace. Check out those numbers. Become a YouTube or Patreon member for just $99 per month. Go to the main channel on YouTube, click join, and then select the betting tier. Do the same thing on Patreon. Make 2025 a winner now.
You heard the man.
Looking at State's next SEC home game. The Georgia Bulldogs, as we kind of just talked about.
Yeah.
You get Texas, and then you get Georgia. That's great. I mean, they are a few weeks apart, but it'll be State's second week of November, so their first home game of the November slate. This is a Georgia team that obviously last year ends up winning the SEC despite kind of having a down year from what we've expected, which I do think it's a little bit of – we talk about a down year, but then you also have to adjust expectations accordingly because it's like, hey, the SEC's tougher now. There is that part of it. The transfer portal has changed things where teams like Georgia and Alabama can't stockpile talent the way they previously could. You know, if you're the guy who's the third stringer for Georgia, yeah, previous years you're just going to stick around because, well, yeah, I'm probably going to play a decent amount and I'll get to be on a team that's really sneaking good. And who knows, if a guy goes down in front of me, I'm going to be a starter. Now with the portal, you're like, oh, I'm going to be number 3. Screw that. I'm going to go start somewhere and go make another team really good. So being able to have 5 stars on the bench has gotten more difficult for those teams at the top. And that changes the calculus a little bit for Georgia. So I do want to say, yeah, it's a step back from what we've expected, but you do have to recalculate expectations slightly. Still, that said, it was not the team that I think everybody was hoping for. And look, they lose quite a bit going into this year. And we know the roster talent elite, it's always going to be, but can they actually improve upon where they were last season? Offensively, one of the big stories, obviously, Gunnar Stockton takes over for Carson Beck. We saw Stockton last year at the end of the season, steps into the SEC championship game, was able to help them get a win there over Texas. And he starts their playoff game against Notre Dame where Georgia lost and didn't look all that good against the Fighting Irish. But look, I think the Carson Beck hate is probably overdone. He didn't have a great season. He turned it over too much. I also think the pieces around him were not good enough for what you wanted out of him. I don't know if Gunnar Stockton's an actual upgrade at the position. I do know he's a guy that they think can run it a little bit more, which could help him out. What I will say for Stockton's sake, he is going to have better weapons around him than what Beck had a season ago. Noah Thomas and Zach Branch are the 2 guys who step in at the transfer portal at receiver. Thomas was the top guy at Texas A&M a season ago and is a real big body player on the outside. Zachariah Branch from USC, where I think he was the leading receiver last year, but a guy who really kind of burst on the scene 2 seasons ago as a really explosive player, as a kick returner and a slot receiver, and a guy who can do some stuff in the run game as well. Be interesting to see how they integrate him in, but a talented piece for them to work with for sure. Colby Young, who's a former Miami transfer, he's healthy after missing most of last season, and that's probably your starting 3 right there. And those are 3 guys where if those are your top 3, man, you're in really good shape. And, Dylan Bell comes back, who last year was, a starter for them. I think he was a starter, but he was one of their top receivers a season ago. He's going into this year as the number 4. And if you're talking about that guy as your number 4 receiver, man, you're in a much better spot from a receiver standpoint. Also, it's Georgia. They're going to have tight ends, and they still have Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky. So they're in good shape there. This is as good a group of pass catchers as Georgia has had in quite some time. You also look in the backfield. They're going to be really good. Nate Frazier last year led the team in rushing with 671 yards, 8 touchdowns, averaged 5 a carry. That dude is got a chance to have a really big season. They bring in Josh McCray from Illinois, who led the Illini with 609 yards and 10 touchdowns a season ago. They feel really good about their running back room. This is probably the strongest they've had at running back since early in Kirby's tenure when they had, those like Nick Chubb, Sony Michel. I'm not saying these guys are going to be that good. Like, that was an insane running back room that they had back in like 2017. But it's probably the best they've had since then. And just in terms of talent, the question is going to be offensive line. Like, I feel like this has been the theme with all of these teams here. Again, they're losing 4 starters up front. And I feel like I keep saying that. Now, they had to play a lot of guys a season ago because they had a lot of injuries up front. Like a guy like Drew Bobo, who, yes, is the son of the offensive coordinator, Mike Bobo. He had to start games for them at center last year. He is stepping in as the full-time starting center this year. So is he a new starter? Technically, but also not really. Like, he has been a starter for them before. And I think it's Andy Staples has used this phrase a couple of times now talking about Georgia, where if Drew Bobo doesn't know the offense like the back of his hand, that's a problem. When you're talking about the guy who's the OC's son, he should probably be able to handle that pretty well. They still have some talented guys back up front. I think there's expectations for this unit to end up actually being pretty good and being able to block better in the run game. Again, I don't think Gunnar Stockton is an improvement over Carson Beck. But with the skill talent improvements that they have, if the offensive line can be fine, this could be a better Georgia offense this year.
It could. And again, I love looking at schedules and stuff. This game with Mississippi State falls the week before the Texas game for Georgia, actually. So that's interesting. Kind of like, I don't see potential upset, but I see where it being in Starkville, could it be a potential like struggle win for Georgia? Could it be a trap? Like, could we, middle of the season, October, can you get some stuff figured out if you're State? That also being said, I would lean more towards no, because it's Georgia we're talking about. You mentioned Gunnar Stockton, and you want to hope that he's the leader Carson Beck was. You want to cut down on turnovers on offense, especially the interceptions. You want to hope that he has good ball security and that he's just that go-to leader. And I'm high on Georgia. I think that they have a lot of potential. And I like Gunnar Stockton to have a better year than what Carson Beck's had the last couple years. And hopefully, if he stays healthy, man, this offense could be pretty darn good. Now, I don't think it's going to be what Texas is. I like Texas and to be the best in the SEC, probably one of the best in the country. But Georgia's top 10, maybe sneak into the bottom top 5. And this is going to be one of those games that you take advantage of us in Mississippi State and maybe prove us wrong. Why you're maybe even top 5, top 3.
If that offensive line comes along, this offense will be really good. And again, I don't know if I believe Stockton will actually have a better season, but with the pass catchers around him that Carson Beck didn't have, that's going to help him out significantly. There's another point about where this game falls on the schedule we can get to here when we talk about the matchup for State at the end. But defensively for Georgia, again, it's not what we've grown to expect. But as I said, it's probably not fair to expect. They're losing a lot up front. Nazir Stackhouse, Michael Williams, Warren Brinson, Jalen Walker, Chaz Chambliss. There's a lot of guys between their defensive line and outside linebackers that all really good players, all big-name players. Expectations are still high. Christian Miller is a returning starter at defensive tackle that they like quite a bit. Gabe Harris at defensive end is someone they're high on. Army transfer Elo Madozi, who's going to be one of their guys at outside linebacker playing that edge rusher spot. He was a third-team All-American a season ago. Really high expectations for him to step in and be a really, really good pass rusher for them off the edge. In good shape at linebacker. When you talk about the inside guys, with C.J. Allen to Raylan Wilson, they're going to be fine there. Malachi Starks and Dan Jackson are both significant losses at safety, but you do have K.J. Bolden at one of the corner spots. You have K.J. Bolden back on the back end. After playing a lot as a freshman a season ago. Dalen Everett is who's returning on the outside as a starting corner, and Daniel Harris made some starts for them at corner down the stretch a season ago, though they gave up a lot of passing yards in those last few games of the season down the stretch, but getting that experience is big for him. So you've got two corners back who have started, significant games for you, have a top-tier safety in KJ Bolden. Secondary is probably going to be really good for this team. Look, I don't think they have the same stars that we've talked about in the past for Georgia defensively in terms of the big names. But if a couple of those new pieces on the defensive line click, and I'll just mention secondary, they got a lot of transfers stepping in that they think could be good contributors for them as well. And they get a couple guys who click on that defensive line, probably going to get back, probably still going to be a really, really strong defense for Georgia. If we're going to talk about the strength for this team, I think it's offensive skill talent, which is not something, again, we've typically talked about with Georgia. But with the guys they have at receiver and running back, tight end as well, that's as good of a group as you're going to be able to find, I think, nationally. They have got a really, really strong group of players across the board. We talk about what they have on offense, and that gives you reason to believe this could be one of the better offenses that Kirby has had. Obviously, with Mike Bobo calling plays, that's always going to raise eyebrows. And the offensive line, there are some questions there, but the skill talent is there for them to be really, really good. Weakness, I think relative to expectation, trench play, both lines of scrimmage, just because I don't know if it's a weakness, but it's more of a – we talk about a team like Georgia or Texas. It's hard to say weakness. It's more what's the thing that we kind of have the biggest question mark about. I do think they are losing so much on both lines of scrimmage. I know there's a lot of talent. I know there's a lot of guys they look at and think could step in and play well. But we talk about offensive line, defensive line for Georgia. Is it going to be as strong up front as we expect for this team? I think it has to be if we're going to talk about them being able to break through and win a national championship. But that's sort of going to be a question mark for them. In terms of the matchup for State, I just think the talent's going to be too much to handle. It's a lot of the same as what I talked about with Texas, where you're just talking about a team that's much better than you across the board, and dealing with that is a struggle. Now, Christian already alluded to it. The one thing that makes this game interesting is where it falls in the schedule for Georgia, because not only do they have Texas the next week, so you want to talk about like a letdown look ahead, they're coming off the cocktail party the week before. So they will have played Florida in Jackson. Is that in Jacksonville this year or is it Atlanta? I think it's still in Jacksonville this year.
I think it is. I think it moves next year. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Regardless, they have Florida, so they have that huge rivalry game. Go to Starkville, then host Texas. If there were ever a game for Georgia to overlook, it is this one. Considering you got a road trip against a team they should just be able to wake up and beat by 40. And it's in between two of their most important games of the season. Two of their three most important games. Like obviously, the Alabama game would be up there as well. That's interesting. And for what it's worth, State did go on the road and put 31 on Georgia a season ago. So, now they did a lot of that in the second half after Georgia had gotten up like 34-10.
But defense took their foot off the gas.
A little bit. But, you still scored 31. You still Michael Van Buren still threw for over 300 yards. I'm not at all going to sit here and tell you State has much of a chance here. I do think there is – because I don't think there's a match – like part of it is it's not just a matter of where the game falls. You have to find – is there a matchup this team could potentially exploit? And I just don't see it for Mississippi State. But with where the game falls,
I don't see an upset, but talking about Georgia's schedule, I think you could expose Georgia. You don't beat them, but you can show holes maybe in the offense, maybe even in the defense. They got some young guys on that side, even though it's always really good. But do you expose them a little bit that, hey, maybe they're not 100% the championship level team that we thought they could be this year?
it's possible. I think your hope for Mississippi State realistically is that this is a game that you gave them enough trouble that at the end of the year, when we're talking about playoff teams, people are saying, well, Georgia looked poor against Mississippi State, and that's a problem for them. Yeah. Georgia won, but they didn't look good in that game. I think that's kind of your hope. Last home game, obviously, we all know what game that's going to be, and that is the Ole Miss Rebels coming in for the Egg Bowl on Black Friday. Last year was their year. Last year, that was their team. That was their opportunity. And just like every Ole Miss team that has had a chance to do something big, they fell flat on their face, because they will ultimately continue to fall flat on their face and just never find the way to capitalize. And I know I'm sitting here from Mississippi State being in a terrible, terrible position as a program right now, building up under Jeff Levy. We're building right now.
Yes.
But yes, I do need to poke fun at the in-state team that they had their greatest opportunity ever to not just get in the playoff. That team was good enough to make noise and beat some teams on the way. That they were loaded enough to do it, and they didn't, which is incredibly funny. That last year they had the disappointing season that they did. They're losing a ton on both sides of the ball. Basically, every major contributor, with few exceptions, are gone. And they're going heavy in the portal. They're relying on some younger guys to step in at some key positions. Christian, let's start with the offense. No more Jackson Dart, no more Trey Harris. What are we looking at for this team? There is a quarterback, though, that people are pretty excited about, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I'm just going to be honest. I didn't look into what they had depth-wise. So who's the quarterback there? Has he been on the roster for a little bit?
Yes, Austin Simmons.
Okay, yeah. He was recruited, and he's been there a little bit. Yeah. Anyway, I'll say this about Ole Miss. I love rivalry games. So before the show, I said I got to take Ole Miss, because I love rivals. I love rivalry games. I love Thanksgiving. I love it. It's a big rivalry. It's at home this year for Mississippi State. They have lost the last 2 games in the series, but they do trail all-time 66, 49, and 6. But wouldn't you just love for Mississippi State to get it together halfway through the season and just knock off Lane Kiffin? Like, just get it done here. Like, it's got to happen at some point. Again, they won it a few years ago, but dude, I am not a believer in the facts that Lane Kiffin can figure out his defense. I love the offense, but even that's probably going to take a small step back this year.
I do need to step in and be like, that defense was really good last year.
It was, but I still don't. I don't buy it. Here's where I don't buy it. Is how many of those games last year, meaningful SEC games, did they play 4 full quarters of football?
Georgia. I mean, they were they played great defensively in that game.
To win, yeah, that's fair. That is fair.
I will say, like,
I haven't, outside of last year though, I haven't really seen it. And the first thing that pops to mind when I hear Ole Miss is not that they have no defense, but it's kind of soft, not too strong. It was improved last year, I'll give them that, but I don't know, man. This is the year to do it if you're State. I don't think it's going to happen, because I do think Ole Miss is just better, but this is a year to really compete and show them that you belong to compete in the state of Mississippi.
Yeah. I mean, look, Ole Miss defensively was legitimately really good last year. They actually just made Pete Golding the top paid assistant in the country as a defensive coach. And I know Alabama fans, it's crazy to them. He's been good for them. He's worked out there. They improved his first season. Last year they were really good. Now they were really good with a bunch of NFL players. So the question is, do you have the same NFL players on that side of the ball? Over to the offense, like Austin Simmons, like there's a lot of hype there. I think like media are in love with this guy because he graduated high school early. He got his college degree in like 2 years, and every time he played baseball some, and then every time he goes and talks to the media, he sounds like a really great kid. So people are in love with this guy and expect and kind of already crowning him as the breakout star in the SEC.
Yeah.
Look, to me, a lot of it is based on one drive. I talked about that Georgia game. Jackson Dart went down briefly against Georgia, and Austin Simmons steps in and just goes and leads Ole Miss on a touchdown drive and throws a beautiful touchdown pass. Like just steps in, calm as day, let him right down the field to score a touchdown. And that was one of those signs of like, oh, like this kid can play. And like that's all we saw of him against a big-time opponent outside of some garbage time duty. But there's a lot of belief. And I will say it is telling that Lane Kiffin did not go in the portal for someone to compete. He did go like add out of the portal some guys who are going to be backups. But like, don't forget a few seasons ago with Jackson Dart returning as the starter. This is after Dart had already been a starter.
Spencer Sanders, right?
Yes, he went and got Spencer Sanders.
And he
also
had
Walker Howard from Ole Miss.
Walker Howard, yeah.
So Lane has like shown, I don't really care about the relationship and confidence of my quarterback thing. Like, and to be clear, Lane, it is on record. He's a great relationship with his QBs. Yeah. But he's also very much open, like, I don't care if it makes you mad, dude. If I think I can get someone in the room who can make us better, I'm going to go and get him. Like, I don't care if you're the returning starter.
If you ain't good on the field, your butt's on the bench, basically. Yeah. I don't care how close we are.
So, like, the fact that Lane didn't do that this year probably says he feels really good about Austin Simmons. Now, the flip side to that is I don't think the quarterbacks available in the portal this year were particularly great. And there is another read into it. Does he think it's worth going after a QB this season when there's this Ole Miss team might take a step back? I don't know. But I do think he views Austin Simmons as like the guy. And like there's some talk that like he could be the most promising QB that Lane has had yet.
Yeah.
They reloaded the receiving core well. Obviously, like you lose I talked about Trey Harris. You do lose Juice Wells, Jalen Watkins, Caden Prieskorn at tight end. They have a lot of guys gone, but Caden Lee comes back.
Quinshot Judkins at running back too. Don't forget, he went pro too. Or no. He that was Ohio State. He was at Ole Miss though.
Yeah, 2 years ago. He was 2 years ago. Yeah,
that's my bad.
He's gone. The running backs they had a season ago. Ulysses Bentley, the guy that Ole Miss fans were furious was not playing, despite clearly being their best running back, and every time he stepped on the field was really good. And Lane just didn't play him. He's in the NFL making some noise in the preseason right now. It's like a lot of skill talent gone, but like the receiving core, you lose a lot of the top guys. But Caden Lee is a slot receiver for them. Last year caught 57 passes for 874 yards. They have him back. Bring Harrison Wallace from Penn State, who had 720 yards a season ago. Dazon Stribling, 882 yards for Oklahoma State last season. So, like, that's your starting trio of receivers more than likely. You're in pretty good shape there. Daquan Wright was impressive for them as sort of the second-string tight end last season. They're going to need him to be really big. They added Luke Haas from Arkansas to come in and be another tight end on that team. Well, he's hurt, and he's probably down for the year. Not official, but it sounds like their chances of getting him back this year are going to be slim. So they need Wright to be even bigger for them this season. I know one of the guys they've moved over, Caleb Odom, Alabama transfer at wide receiver, has made the move to tight end because to give them some more depth there, and he's probably going to be a guy who gets on the field at that spot. So, look, from a pass catcher standpoint, they're still in a good shape. Logan Diggs at running back, if healthy, that's a former LSU transfer who was really good for the Tigers a couple seasons ago. He missed most of last year, but they think they got him healthy this year. They like him. Kwan Lacey transfers from Missouri, who's another guy that was a former big-time recruit who didn't really show it at Mizzou, but they think he can be a big-time player for them. The skill talent is probably fine. The question on offense, as has been the case with every single one of these teams, it's offensive line. They lose a ton of experience up front. And unlike some of these other teams we've talked about, the guys, like they added some okay transfers, the guys stepping in are not surefire. Like, they're not guys you point to and say for sure, based on recruiting profile, based on previous production, oh yeah, he's going to come in and be a great offensive lineman for them. Plus, they're dealing with some injuries here in the fall. Like, that is an issue for them right now. And I think Lane's kind of been open with some of his preseason comments that offensive line is a bit of a concern for them here early in the year. I think he's mostly talking about from a health standpoint, but I think quality of play is a concern as well. So that would be my one big worry for Ole Miss offensively is that O-line. Again, I think Austin Simmons, for as talented as he is, a first-time starter, like, I think this could be a light version of – well, it's kind of interesting. There's some parallels here to talking about Quinn Ewers and to Arch Manning compared to going from Jackson Dart to Austin Simmons. Now, Jackson Dart, a much better college quarterback than Quinn Ewers. Arch Manning, ceiling-wise, we think is much better than Austin Simmons, although we don't know that. People are very high on Austin Simmons.
Yeah.
But kind of the similarity is that with Ewers at Texas, despite not being the most talented QB in the room, being the veteran presence to run Sark's offense was what they wanted. And he was a good leader for that team, and he was going to go out and just do what they needed him to do and could consistently do it. With Ole Miss, it's kind of the same thing where Jackson Dart had limitations as a passer in terms of his ability to read a defense, not in terms of his ability to make a throw. But the kid was tough as nails. He was a great leader on that team. He could execute the offense and do what they needed him to do. So they were going to trust him out there. Now you're bringing in a guy, both at Texas and at Ole Miss, who in theory is more talented than the guy replacing, but with less experience. What does that look like on the field? So that is going to be a question for them offensively. Defensive side of the ball, losing a lot here. I mean, it's 4 NFL defensive linemen are gone up front. And they didn't portal super hard. They added a couple guys, one kid from LSU and then one kid from Nebraska.
Yeah.
But they didn't go super heavy in the portal. What does that mean? Is it the same thing as what we talked about with Austin Simmons at quarterback, where it's like, hey, I like our guys better than what's available in the portal? Or is it just a case of we're not really looking to go all in on this position right now with a team that might be having to take a little bit of a step back? I don't know. I will say this. They've recruited really well on the defensive line for the last few seasons. Just like I say this as a Mississippi State fan, historically, Mississippi State has dominated defensive line recruiting within the state of Mississippi. This is a state that produces a lot of really good defensive linemen. Typically, for the ones who don't go out of state, which is always a big concern, guys going to Bama, Georgia, LSU, Auburn, that's always the thing you have to battle. But typically, the big-time defensive linemen in the state of Mississippi who don't leave have gone to Mississippi State. The last few years, that's flipped in favor of Ole Miss. Like, Pete Golding has been getting those guys to go to Oxford. And they have stockpiled some really talented defensive linemen who haven't played a lot for them, but the recruiting profile, it's like 4 and 5 star guys. Like, really good, highly talented defensive linemen. They need those guys to step up. You know, you look at guys like William Eccles, Cam Franklin. Those are big-time recruits from the last few signing classes who they need to be big contributors this year. But the talent profile is there. They still have a veteran defensive tackle in Xavier Harris, who's been a very productive player for them. And then linebacker Sunterrain Perkins is sort of an edge rusher. He had 10.5 sacks a season ago. I mean, he is a really, really stinking good player. Like, he is the best player on the team, the best player they have back. If you were going to build around a guy on defense that have returning, Perkins is that guy. You know, I talked about addition like Prince Will Umunmielen, who is Princely's younger brother, comes over from Nebraska, who's sort of a high-profile transfer, could step in. This could still end up being a good defensive line. Now, I don't believe they're going to be as good as they were a season ago. When, again, they had 4 guys who got drafted in the NFL, including some high draft picks. They're probably not going to be that good, but they're probably going to be pretty good up front again. But, again, they need some young guys to step in. Linebacker room could be really good. They do lose Chris, I don't know why I said hashtag, Chris, a.k.a. Pooh Paul. That's a pretty significant loss, but they're in still good shape. TJ Daugherty was the second leading tackler. They have Marshall transfer Jaden Yates, who was a first-team All-Sun Belt player. Grambling transfer Andrew Jones was like an FCS All-American type guy who was incredibly productive. Linebacker room, and again, Suntrain Perkins is a linebacker. He's just more of an edge rusher. They're great, really good shape at linebacker. Secondary is where I have the most questions about this defense. They need a lot of transfers to hit. They have some good pickups there, but they basically brought in transfers at every spot. Jalen Braxton at corner is the one in particular who you look at a couple seasons ago at Arkansas, really promising freshman season, went into last year with sky-high expectations, gets hurt in the season opener, misses the entire year. Now Ole Miss has needed him to step in and continue that trajectory that he had as a true freshman. There's some talent, but a lot of guys who have not done it before, and they're going to need those spots to hit. I mean, it's very much portal roulette when you talk about Ole Miss in the secondary. The strength of this team, I think, is actually that linebacker room. When you factor in Suntrain Perkins as like the leader with Daugherty coming back and the transfers coming in, they're going to be really good at linebacker. And I think that's going to help them out a lot in terms of what they're able to do in that front six on defense. Weakness-wise, it's offensive line. Like there is the general question as being a portal team. And like when you go so heavy on the portal, some years it clicks and you have a breakthrough season. Some years you're 2024 Florida State. And you see what happens there when you go heavy in the portal. Like there can be some drastic changes when you're that heavy in the transfer portal. That said, I do think if there's like one position, it's offensive line, just with what they have to replace. Already having some concerns about that position last year. Big questions for them there. From a matchup standpoint, I mean, it's tough to pinpoint because we're talking about the last game of the year, and the Egg Bowl kind of just sort of whatever can happen. I would say whichever team is further along in terms of their trench play is who's going to be better off. The odds are better with Ole Miss. I think these teams could be similar up front along the offensive line, where I do think State's offensive line is going to be improved, but I don't know if we're talking about a great or even good unit. I think Ole Miss's offensive line is probably going to be pretty average for a college offensive line. If we're talking about two teams that have average college offensive lines, all right, well, what do they have up front on the defensive line? The ceiling of Ole Miss's defensive line is higher than Mississippi State's. So I think that's sort of the difference when you talk about that game and why Ole Miss probably still going to have the edge. But look, I mean, otherwise, elsewhere on the board, I think it could be pretty comparable between the two teams. And with it being in Starkville, who knows, State might have a chance.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the season, man. And we talk about all these games, and they just, like we've talked about, 4 or 5 win team, try to make a bowl game, pull some upsets here or there. And, I'm really high on what Mississippi State can do this year. I think it's a tough schedule, but it's because they're coming off a really bad year, and the opponents where you have to go play regardless, even if it's at home. But, this is a team with a lot of good talent for Mississippi State. And I think regardless of game outcomes, you can see where it's going to improve week in and week out and probably just throughout the year.
Yeah, and look, I think when you talk about these 4 games as a whole, if you win one of these 4, I would say
Right?
it's a successful season. Like the odds are you did enough elsewhere that you had a good year, even if you're not going to a bowl game.
To get an upset somewhere, yeah.
An upset in one of these 4 is a success. If you found a way to win 2, which I don't think is going to happen. If you're winning 2, I think you're talking about Tennessee and Ole Miss because I just don't see Texas and Georgia. You win 2 of these things, Jeff Levy probably, we're talking about him as SEC Coach of the Year because that would be a huge, huge surprise for what the team could be. But look, if State goes 0-4 in these games, I don't think that's a big deal. I don't think that means the season was a failure because I think you're most likely having to find your wins elsewhere. But if you can find a way to get one here, I think that's huge for Jeff Levy and his tenure and just setting you up to go forward as an improved team in the SEC.
Absolutely. Yep.
I think that's going to do it for us today.
All right.
Again, thanks for everybody for tuning in. If you could give us that like, share the channel, subscribe to the channel, and again, turn on that notification bell so you do know when we go live. Love to have you guys being able to interact throughout the show. It's really great to see. And, we'll be back later in the week to do our big season preview. We're going to give you our full thoughts on the Bulldogs going to the 2025 season because week 0 of college football is this weekend. We have officially reached college football season. It's great. So, 1 week from now, we're going to be breaking down State's trip to Southern Miss in Hattiesburg to open up the year. So We'll be back later in the week to give you a full breakdown of the 2025 season, give you our thoughts and prediction. So again, thanks for everybody listening. Thanks for Christian, and we'll see y'all later in the week.
See y'all.